Hi, I'm Bianca Rose. I'm a Senior Portfolio Manager at Morningstar Investment Management. We're here to do Morningstar's Market Minute, where we touch on markets, economy, and all the key events that have happened this week. First up, what has happened in markets this week? So maybe to keep things simple, just let's focus on the US and Australia. So if we look at the US, over the weekend in Australian time, we had a few announcements that came through. The first one really was Moody's downgrading US government credit rating down from AAA down to AA1. Now, markets were maybe initially spooked by that, but then seemed to kind of, sail through when we looked earlier this week. And really, why is that? Well, I guess it's not the first credit rating agency to downgrade. That, really follows Fitch and also S&P, who have done that over the last decade or so. So really, Moody's was the third one, or third cab off the rank there to do that. But what we did see is that maybe had a later repercussion later in the week. And what we saw just on, Wednesday US time was that we did see the 20-year government bond auction happen. The yields there were a little bit higher in that there was weaker demand for the 20-year government bonds. And so, what we're really seeing is now that the markets are starting to think about that kind of notion of US exceptionalism and whether it's actually kind of coming to unraveling there, if you like. And so we did see, while equity markets were fairly flat during the week in the US, they had kind of tumbled overnight on Wednesday. If we now just also look at the second kind of major development in the US over the weekend, and we look at Trump, and obviously all eyes have been on the latest tariff announcements there. What we did see was maybe some announcements from him in terms of specifically major grocery chain Walmart over there, who has talked about having to increase product prices for consumers, and he's told them to eat those tariffs. Now, in terms of eating those tariffs, what does that mean? It really means that he wants them to take a hit on their profit margins. And I think the reality is that they probably will have to take a little bit of a hit on their profit margins. But I think also the reality is that also on the other side, we'll probably see some consumer price increases in the US, and we're expecting that to come through from tariffs. It remains to be seen in terms of when we're looking at companies reporting how tariffs will ultimately land. But we do expect that tension between profit margins and the government's tariff policy to kind of continue to be a feature over the coming months. Now, if we move across to our side of the world in Australia, and we think about the kind of key developments there. So this week, we also had two major kind of events come through. One was on the interest rate front. We saw the RBA cut interest rates in a long anticipated move for mortgage holders. I know they've been really waiting for this, and it was dropped by 25 bips down to 3.85. So, bond markets seem to have anticipated that move, but equity markets did slightly rally post the news, which was seen as a positive sign for our market. And just later in the week, when we look at the Aussie market today, where we're looking later in the week, we have seen, though, that US kind of wobbles in the equity market have kind of filtered through to our market. So that earlier kind of positivity from the interest rate drop in the Aussie equity market has now kind of started to turn into a bit of a wobble now once we take the cross currents from the US equity market. And then the second development within Australia has really been on the kind of political front, if you like. So while we saw in early May Labor come in handily with a win, what we've seen is the coalition party made up of the Nationals and Liberal Party have kind of call it a split or a divorce, if you like. Now that's kind of the last time that happened was back in 1987. So isn't the first time these guys have split from each other. They have done it 3 times before. But nevertheless, that's kind of, probably another notable move that has happened. And we're probably expecting to see some new policies come out from the Liberal Party following their loss to the Labor Party there. And so for us, what does that all mean in terms of this volatility? For us, we don't really change our expectations on very short-term news, but we do kind of look to think about what markets are pricing in. So for us, it really it all kind of comes down to expectations and what markets are pricing in, and we use valuation as our guide to guide our portfolio positions. Where we're seeing value today, we continue to see more value in emerging market equities, particularly China equities and Korea equities, and also some of those consumer cyclical stocks that have been hard hit in Europe and the US on the back of the tariff announcements. So that's it from me, and thank you for listening.
Any advice in this video is general advice prepared by Morningstar without reference to your objectives, financial situation, or needs. You should consider the advice in light of these matters and any relevant product disclosure statement before making any decision to invest.